Hey, it's the eights. We will not call it the Weekly Sizzle anymore. I need one of you to be really honest with our audience and me. Who's willing to be honest?
Okay.
Okay. So, first of all, we're filming a little bit closer to the camera today. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I have a giant zit in the middle of my forehead. Is it obvious for the people that are watching out there?
No.
All right. See? That's the beauty of TV magic. The beauty of this is we keep on talking about things that make no connection back to franchising.
That's correct. I was just remarking there's a TV in front of us, I guess. The Better Umbrella. Check it out.
See, this is off to a horrible start, and we're going to get back on track because Cassie's here, and our 5 viewers love Cassie more than me and Megan.
Thanks, guys.
She didn't even say you did a nice job. She just completely took credit for that. All right, well, welcome to the 8s. This is going to be a great 8 because we're in December. We're going to start off by talking about the transparency report. On September 9th, we put out our first transparency report, and I think there's a few data points that are important for our readers. I'm going to go ahead and share the data, and then the two of you can share anything that you want that you feel our readers should know about how we structure 1851. So for you watching, we want to make sure that we're constantly giving you the right information about how we structure 1851. So let me start off right away, and if you see behind us, there's the No Limit logo and the 1851 logo. We are still run by No Limit Agency. The way that we structure 1851 is because we have such a large staff on the agency side. They're the support staff for 1851. So 1851 is actually a client of No Limit Agency. The cool thing about that is the agency's job is to constantly find great brand biographies. So we're constantly looking for great brand stories, and then we're able to tell them to you. Yes, is there edge towards the brands that we rep at No Limit Agency that end up being pushed to 1851? Absolutely. However, that's because that's the depth of information that we're given. The cool thing is, I'm kind of jumping around on my notes here. If you saw the notes, you'd see that I'm not going in order. But Cision, which is a giant media database that most PR agencies use, and it would probably be named the most credible resource for media contacts, they now recognize 1851 as a legitimate publication. The cool thing about that is now we're getting great stories from many more people at large agencies that want their clients' stories told. So the more stories we get from you, the more stories we can tell. And obviously we have our pulse on as much as we can as a publication, but just like any publication that exists out there, that is important to note, that now we want more stories from you. We've constantly said that to you, our audience. If you go to similarweb.com, it's a great analytical data site for websites. They're one of the more credible website data sites. And if you look at there, currently they report that we have slightly over 100,000 visitors, which would rank 1851 slightly out of the top 100,000 U.S. websites. Our average duration, according to SimilarWeb, is 1 minute 54 seconds. Our average viewer, you, is looking at 1.28 pages, and our bounce rate, which means those that come to our site and bounce without it registering within a data point, is 65%. Our Google Analytics reports that we had in November, 95,000 readers, average page view of 1.7, duration of 2 minutes 36 seconds, and a bounce rate of 43.35 seconds. What we've learned with analytics is data is not always perfect, but somewhere in between there makes most sense. Now, in our current structure of 1851, if you look at the way that we structure our URLs, a brand like Wild Birds Unlimited, which is one of Megan's favorites, they have their own URL. So we've actually built out the system so that the brands that are featured within the site have their own URLs. As we continue to advance our model, and it might be sometime in December, more likely January, we're actually going to change the URL structure so that all the URLs live under one umbrella. That'll be better for the SEO value for the clients that we have. So now everything that we do from a main site will create more exposure for all the brands that exist within the model, hopefully driving more organic readers to our brand pages. So for you, the reader, it's important to know that we really have many websites that are built into the 1851 structure. But if you look at SimilarWeb just from a basic, and they report a little bit more in readers, a little bit higher bounce rate than our own Google Analytics, but you can get a sense of how many people are actually looking at 1851. And we're still a profitable business. That's how we're structured. In the last quarter, we added 2 more writers, including a former editor who Megan very gracefully took over on his departure. But our former editor, Chad Cohen, is back freelancing for 1851. And Scott Oakes, who's a former vice president in the franchise development world, has joined our team as one of our strategy folks. So our team continues to grow, and we're expanding there. So again, and lastly, there's 53 brands that are currently using 1851. Fran Connect, as a technology provider, has 600 brands using their technology. So we're far from mainstream within the franchise industry, but we're taking the right steps to growing this platform so more brands have the opportunity to share their stories. So again, I want to make sure that we're transparent with our audience, because I feel like that's what you're expecting us to be with the brands that we represent on here. So I figured that was important data to give you on this week's 8. Megan, do you want to provide any insight or thoughts that you have as we go through transparency notes on 1851?
Yeah, I think I think what's important is to know that there are sort of 2 sides of 1851. You have the front-facing main site, which is very much our editorial team putting together the news that we think is important for our readers. And then you have, as you mentioned, the brand pages, which is where we're working directly with different brands to kind of craft their perfect story. And it's kind of interesting to see these 2 different things come together and see the value that that's giving to brands and values that that's giving to readers, which we target business-minded people. So
yeah, I think there's a great point that Megan just said. On the main site, you're seeing more content, and some of it comes from much more credible sources than 1851, like the Wall Street Journal and Today's Show and CNN, as we find important news that is relevant back to franchising. And then within the brand pages, even though we're crafting the story in many cases, we're still aggregating content from other media sources, and we're trying to put together the perfect brand biography for you, the franchise prospect, or you, the current franchisee, to look at. So there's almost 2 different types of editorial that we apply to you guys, the reader, but it's still all great content, and it's still real content. There's nothing false or lying in the way that we structure those stories. Cassie, any thoughts that you wanted to add?
Yes, and you touched on this, Nick. Regardless of whether or not you're a brand that works with No Limit Agency, if you have a story to tell, we want to be able to tell that for you on the front end of the site. I've recently, even this week, had some interviews with some great clients that aren't related to NLA at all, and it's really exciting to see where this is going, and we hope that we continue to tell these great stories for any business or brand that wants to be heard.
Yeah, that's great. Just because it's valuable, Megan, your email address is megan@1851franchise.com?
Yes, it is.
And yours is Cassie at 1851?
Cassidy.
Oh, we got to get this right. Cassidy. She likes to go by Cassie. Okay. And mine is nick@nolimitagency.com. So if any of you, our readers, have any thoughts or comments or concerns that you want us to continue to address, and some of these, like not being in the Cision database, was one of the current concerns that we heard from the outside world that we needed to correct, which Cision was very, very pleased to have us join their group. Be sure to let us know. We're happy to make those changes. So now, even though we're deep into this, we'll go quickly through the 8 things that are most important. 8, the buzz, 25 brands to watch issue. Megan, do you want to give some insight? We covered senior care this week, but just some insight to how that's going.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, senior care went up today. We had a feature that took a look at home franchises. So companies that you can just run from the comfort of your home. You don't need to invest in a store build out or anything like that. So that includes companies like Mosquito Joe or Welcome Mat. So it's kind of an interesting take to the rest of the list, which was very much like senior care or what was the other one? Pet care. And then we have retail franchises coming up as well. So there's really a nice mix of different brands in there.
Yeah, so the list that we're giving you, it's 25 brands. It doesn't mean those are the 25 absolute brands that you should be looking at. We're trying to give you a scope of brands. So if you're looking at one as a franchise prospect, maybe you look at a few to see which one actually fits your portfolio the best. Brand of the week, ding. is Togo's this week. Togos.1851franchise.com. Within their content base, you have 2 openings, so it's showing movement in the brand. They're opening new units. There's a story in Yahoo Finance about the top C-level executives in their company. There's a story about them building a fanatic fan base, which is obviously important to you, the franchise prospect, to make sure that the consumer base is very strong and in love with the brand. And they also have a story about how they set their brand apart from the competition. Cassie, you want to take a swing at any notes on Togo's?
Absolutely. Every Togo's franchisee that I've talked to really does have this intense passion for the brand, which you can really tell they want to be opening more units. They want to see Togo's grow, which is really what's going to be fueling them down the line. So I think it's an exciting brand, and as they expand out, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up.
That's great. People story, Howard Schultz resigned as Starbucks CEO. That's obviously been big news this week. Our profit story, Chipotle's founder admits that he's nervous about the 2017 outlook. What I find interesting about that story is Chipotle is a non-franchise brand. Maybe that's where franchise brands are protected, because here it's literally one leadership guiding the way that things work on the local level. So you're following a playbook similarly, but there's no skin in the game. So if something goes bad, that personal emotion that goes into the brand might not be there. That where the franchise brand, if they went through the same scenario, it might have been corrected a lot faster than having a giant brand awareness issue. But it's interesting that the darling in the industry, the one that's been the best brand forever, is now seeing some struggle points. But I promise you, just like McDonald's did a few years ago, that's a brand that will have a comeback soon. Our Places story, Papa Murphy's launched a new turnkey development program. A lot of brands are starting to create flexibility in their unit creation, or in building out stores in front of signing a franchisee. Megan, just some thoughts on brands that are being flexible in their build out.
I think Papa Murphy's is a great example. I think brands are trying to make it as easy as possible to get their locations up and running as quickly as possible. So when a franchisee is signing their contract, that there is very little time in between that moment to them having the grand opening. So they're really ramping up the time to getting the store up and running, which is good news for the franchisee, obviously. So.
Good. Columns. Last week I wrote about they are who they thought they were, which the great Dennis Green very angrily after Chicago Bears game did not like reporters asking if he knew or expected them to play the way that they did. Here's the thing, the connection back to this is franchisees and franchisors. You are who we think you are. If you have a gut feeling that this brand's not going to work out for you, prospective franchisee, it probably won't. And vice versa, franchisor, don't be afraid to say no to someone who won't fit into your system. The columns on the site. In the media, and this actually happened yesterday, Hardee's CEO, Andy Puzder, he is now on Trump's cabinet, which was somewhat expected. I know at the Franchise Times Restaurant Finance Conference, there's a lot of buzz around the fact that he was most likely going to be put on the cabinet. So I find that interesting, especially as it results back to labor. That's good news for business. Bad news for those that were expecting significant changes. We'll see what happens, but it's interesting to actually have someone that understands franchising in the government. We've talked about this before, that a lack of education by government officials probably creates opinions that might not be justified back to franchising, and hopefully this is an important step in impacting the franchising world. Thought of the day, transparency wins the race. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And actually, I wrote on here, but it's still lipstick, which that is not the right note. We've given you the transparency report. I was flying American Airlines, and if you fly American Airlines, you could probably find this in their magazine too. They had Dallas as a city that they were highlighting this year, and they put trendsetters or trailblazer leaders in Dallas. And it's American Way, it's their publication, and right there, as the third expert for Dallas, was the CEO of American. We've been criticized for including No Limit Agency as a supplier to watch, or 1851 as a supplier to watch, or even me included in stories. I was recently talking to an expert in franchising, high level, maybe a part of the association. I said, what would you say about someone who's 35 years old, who has been to 10 IFA conventions, who has created 2 businesses that are impacting franchises? Would you say that they're someone that you would be interested in talking to? And they said, absolutely. And I said, well, that's me. Now, that sounds egotistical as I talk to you on the camera, but there are going to be places where myself or Megan or Cassie, as excellent editors and writers, might be the source behind the story. That doesn't mean we're playing favorites to the way that we're telling the story. It's just that we are parts of the story. And if American Way, one of the biggest airlines in the world, can go ahead and put their CEO inside their magazine, then I don't have any issue putting our staff in front of our magazine too. Now, if you look at NoLimitAgency.1851franchise.com, you'll see a lot of our stories, and a lot of them are being kept off the main site because we're using the tool just like a lot of the brands are out there. But I really feel like transparency, which is why we're being upfront with you and we'll constantly be upfront with you, our reader, our audience, is critical to winning the race. For you franchisors, if you have ugly things that have happened in your brand, don't try to hide them. Don't move them down on Google. Come and address it straight on. Say how you've corrected it. That's where brands like the darling of the industry get ripped, when you try pushing things aside and don't come out there and actually admit that things are wrong and here's how we're going to fix it. If we were all a little bit more transparent as an industry, as human beings, as franchisees and franchisors, everything would go a lot smoother. Our job at 1851 is to be transparent about the stories we tell you, and we're very grateful that you guys watched this. So now, after probably the longest 8 in history, and if you've actually watched this long, Megan, has anything changed on my forehead?
No, everything's great.
She looked directly at it. Cassie, any closing notes here?
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Bless up.
Hey, and by the way, before we leave, the most amazing thing about this version of the 8, I don't know what she just did, is because we moved closer to the table, Megan's hands weren't all over the place. That's the 8.